and welcome to the Homeschooling and Loving It podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, your friend at homeschool.com and homeschool mom of 6. Join us as we keep it real and chat about the ups and downs of this amazing adventure we call the homeschool life. So grab a cup of your warm favorite and a comfy chair and let's get started. Hello, and welcome to Homeschool.com's Homeschooling and Loving It podcast. Today we dive into the world of whole testing and assessment. Whether you're a seasoned homeschooler or maybe you're just starting out, this episode will provide some valuable insight on testing. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's get started. All right, so to kick this off, let's just talk about testing and assessment in general. And so there are 3 types of homeschool testing. And I would like to say, the first one would be your daily school grades. And, this is balancing formal grading, which we would call formal grading quizzes and tests, along with the informal assessments of monitoring your children's progress, watching where they're improving, where they need help, where they need work. And, we do that as homeschool parents. That's like a constant. As we work with our kids, we can see their progress and we can also see their areas of weakness. So we're assessing. That's not formal assessment, but we are assessing them daily in that way. All right. There is also, the idea of daily homeschool grades. There's flexibility, in the fact that, for example, with my 6 kids, when my kids were in elementary school, apart from the time that we use kind of like an online school, we did not keep elementary school grades. Now, that isn't to say I did not assess them daily, because I worked with them. I knew their progress. I knew where they were at, their strengths, their weaknesses, but we didn't do quizzes and tests on a regular basis. Now, as they got a little bit older and they got into middle school, then I started introducing it, got them acclimated to it. And then, of course, as they went into high school, they really understood the stakes of the quiz and a test, and it prepared them then for graduation and college. So that's just kind of my take on it. So you understand that you don't have to do formal grading on a daily. All right, another type is a placement test. And this is really kind of a tool for understanding where your child should start in their education. Okay, so this is a very handy tool if you are just getting started to homeschooling and maybe you're starting with a brand new curriculum and you're not too sure about scope and sequence and where your child may fall and what they've mastered and what they haven't mastered. So taking a placement test is a great way to figure out where your child to be. Okay, sometimes the placement test will determine their grade level, and sometimes it gets a little bit more granular than that, and it tells you exactly where in that grade level that your child needs to be learning. All right, so there are some curriculum that provide free placement tests, and that is very nice because that gives you insight into where within their curriculum your child needs. All right, another type of assessment is the portfolio. And, we've heard about portfolio assessment a lot in regards to traditional, but I want you to know as homeschool families that portfolio assessment is a really neat method to use in your homeschool. It's super fun and, it's alternative. It's not the formal quizzes and tests, but it's an example of their work, their progress over time. And so, you can have a lot of fun with this, and it can even turn keepsake. But it's a comprehensive documentation of your child's progress. So you can showcase, you can choose their favorites and include them in your portfolio. And there are different types of portfolios. Just to throw them out, and we'll kind of dig into them in just a minute, but there's a showcase portfolio, progress portfolio, working portfolio, and virtual. And we'll get into that in a minute. Some states actually require a portfolio for evaluation. Now, my family was from Ohio and Pennsylvania. My sisters homeschooled in Pennsylvania, and so I know from fact that they had to create a rather comprehensive portfolio and have a reviewer as part of the Department of Education. They had a reviewer review their portfolio and recommend, if they weaknesses or whatever issues with it, then they could work on that. But that was kind of a formal requirement of the state. So very interesting. But anyway, portfolios can be a really fun way to assess your child's progress, and they can be fake. All right, so I mentioned requirements by state. Yeah, that is kind of a big deal. And really, as home, we love the flexibility. We are kind of, we're the teacher, we're the principal. It's all rolled into one. We're the Department of Education for our own home. And so we can make the call on how we decide to do. However, there are some states that have mandatory grading, mandatory reporting that's required to do. Now, in those states, that is your first and foremost responsibility. Fulfill your state laws. You don't want that hanging over you. You don't want to test the state. Thankfully, after a long, difficult battle throughout the late 70s and 80s, homeschooling is now legal in all of the United States. Now, it's only been, I want everybody to realize, it's only been 30 years that homeschooling has been legal in the United States. So that's something, all of us newcomers to homeschooling, we didn't fight that battle, but we're reaping the benefits of it. So we should be grateful, to be thankful that those who went before us fought that hard battle for us. And now we just have to deal with a few state requirements. Thankfully, that's all we have. So some do require that review of your child's work. There are some states that require nothing, which is wonderful. And then there's kind of some middle ground states that do require, like Georgia, for example, standardized tests every few years, which, that is a very requirement, not difficult. But that does require us as homeschoolers to find someone, someplace, a testing situation. Now, thankfully, things are more online now since the pandemic. But that makes us have to take standardized tests. So that's also something to consider. All right. So let's go ahead and move into the second segment, which I want to talk about those portfolios, because that is a way to assess your students' progress that, number one, you may be required by your state to do, but number two, really, it can be such a fun way to keep lasting mementos of what you did. And so, great way to track progress and keep great memories. So, what is a homeschool portfolio? Well, formally said, it's a record of a student's educational journey. It can include evidence of learning. It can include amazing highlights of great moments in your child's education. It can show things that demonstrate substantial progress, milestones in their learning experience. What are the different types of homeschool portfolios? Well, I mentioned them a minute ago. Let's start talking about them. There's a showcase portfolio, and the showcase portfolio is more of that one that I was just mentioning, where you can almost have a keepsake, this portfolio. I knew a homeschool family that bought those very thin, clear totes they use sometimes for craft purposes. They're kind of square. They're about maybe 4 inches thick. She would buy one for each kid each year, and they would choose their assignments throughout, from the beginning, middle, end of the year, throughout the course of the year, and they would put them in, and then they would go back and look at them. She said it just really turned into such a wonderful memory. So that's an idea. But the showcase portfolio emphasize the student's best, and they serve kind of as a curated collection of and it demonstrates your child's proficiency. So what can you put in them? What are good ideas to put in, especially the showcase portfolio? Well, you can choose exemplary assignments or projects, essays, and artwork, just astounding pieces that really show skill and accomplishments of your child. You can also, as the parent teacher, you can put reflection. So maybe you want to put a little sticky note on this one piece to reflect on why it was such an important in your child. You can maybe add the skills that your child had developed and maybe what challenges they overcame in this project that you're highlighting. And then, of course, because we don't have unlimited space, we want to always remember quality over quantity. So you want to prioritize your selection when you choose portfolio. So a few very well-chosen, thoughtful people will make an impact. All right, so what can you do? What do you do with these portfolios? And I've mentioned a few things, that we can have a nice little keepsake of our children and their growth, but you can use them for other things too. So one thing that comes to mind as your child gets older, maybe into the high school years, you can use it in a job interview. For these older students, they can become a professional portfolio. Because, as homeschoolers, one of the things I love to encourage you to do with your high school students to get involved in internships and places and opportunities where they can get experience and actually learn skills before they get out there as an adult. Another thing you can use a portfolio for is college applications. You can collect all the things that you feel just really make you stand apart and impress college admissions. All right, so let's move on to the second kind of portfolio. It's a progress portfolio, and this is really used for reflection as well. They focus on the journey rather than just final products, okay? A progress portfolio will capture that evolution of skill and understanding. So it's going to paint this picture of your child's growth, right? So what do we put in here? What are the contents of this portfolio? You can include drafts and revisions. Maybe you put the first draft of a paper and the final draft of the paper so that you have an example of how far your child came in Word project. You can put in notes, process notes, document either your child, your students' thought processes, or your thoughts about their work. You can also document their struggles and any breakthroughs that they had in the learning process. And it's always wonderful to include reflections on how you as well. It just makes for a nice, beautiful story that we can, okay? All right, so where can we use these? These are great for just understanding the learning process of your child. So if we use this type of portfolio, the progress portfolio, we kind of for ourselves see how our children learn best. And then we can even use it to sit down and talk to our children about how they learn and how they think. And that is called metacognition. And it's a very important part of learning. And so this is a great conversation starter, a great way to help them think about how they can themselves. So basically they're thinking about their thinking and their learning. So it's also a good way to encourage feedback. So students learn from mistakes. We all learn from mistakes, right? And so when we learn from mistakes, we can iterate on our work. We can change for the better. And so it makes for a healthy process, a healthy learning process, all right? It's also a really good way, to just assess your child. And sometimes when you are required to do a portfolio, they may ask. All right, another one is called a working portfolio. And with a working portfolio, you will have multiple examples over time, okay? And really, to be honest, this is more the traditional type of portfolio that regular school settings is. And then more than likely, your reviewer, if you're in a state that requires a portfolio, more than likely they will ask for this type. If they don't, then you can feel free to try one of the other types of portfolios. But most of the time, it does end up being this working portfolio that includes multiple examples over time. Okay, so what is the point of this type of portfolio? They capture a range of work across subjects and time periods. So this type of portfolio is also dynamic, and it is going to change throughout the course of the year. All right, so what do you put in this type of portfolio? You're going to have assignments, projects, experiments, and even, some creative endeavors, some art projects in there. All right, you're also going to want to include annotations, reflections, as we talked about in the other ones, so you can add notes to each entry in your portfolio, explaining the context, the goals, and even the desired learning outcomes from that particular assignment. And so with this type of portfolio, you are going to want regular updates, and you can set the interval at whatever time you deem necessary, unless your state has given you a requirement along those lines. But I would say at least once a month, or maybe every few weeks, however you determine that you want to make these regular updates. All right, what can you use these portfolios for? It gives you a really holistic of student ability. It's a beautiful snapshot that gives you that complete view. You can also use it, again, as we mentioned in the last one, as a great conversation starter, where you can have some deep conversations about your child's progress, maybe your child's needs. Discuss that using the evidence that is in the portfolio. You can also use this to encourage your children to self-assess, and so they can see clearly their progress from the beginning of the year. All right, and then the last one, this is kind of fun. This is virtual portfolios, and this is something obviously that would have been a little bit newer type of portfolio, but it's an online portfolio. Virtual portfolios actually use digital tools for organization, accessibility, and for sharing. And some of the things that you can put in these would include snapshots, upload snapshots of document assignments. You can take pictures just of your child in the act of learning. You can create videos. You can do audio recordings. There's so many options when you a virtual portfolio. You can even include hyperlinks, which would link to external websites or blogs or maybe online projects that your children have accomplished. And you can use interactive elements, like we mentioned, the video and audio. It really enhances this and makes it kind of a cool project. And then finally, how can you use these virtual portfolios? Now, number one, the first thing I think of, because obviously I'm a mom of 6 kids, I'm going to think about space. And with 6 kids, portfolios were kind of difficult to keep year after year after year. So often I would just choose like 1 or 2 highlights from every year because that gets to be quite the extensive library. But with a virtual portfolio, you don't have as any longer. You can also incorporate this into remote learning. I mean, this is on-the-go learning at its best, because maybe you're out on a field trip and your kids are interacting and are learning something. You can take a snapshot of that and pop that right into your virtual portfolio. It's super. You can also collaborate with other homeschoolers, which is super fun. And there's another thing. We recently, let's say fall of 2020, we did a podcast with a wonderful lady, homeschool mom, who her and her friend had put together this app. It was designed specifically for this purpose, for virtual portfolio. And it was so amazing. Just talking about all of the real features and all of that. I'll link that podcast in the show notes. You might want to look into that because it was super. Like if the student wasn't with mom, but had that app on their phone, they could go ahead and take a picture of the learning that they were engaged in as proof to mom or dad that they were actually learning and they did this, and it could be part of their portfolio as an option. So pretty cool option. All right, so one of the things that, we get into is, okay, we've got this portfolio. My student and I have worked together, collaborated to select the projects and entries for a portfolio, but now what do we do? I mean, how do I clearly assess this portfolio? Well, like we mentioned previously, if you're in a state that is requiring a portfolio, you don't have to worry about it because you're going to have a certified reviewer review that portfolio, and they will give you their feedback. But then what do I do as a parent? Well, there are some things actually, we on homeschool.com have a list of what we should be learning in grades. Now, I am not a proponent of one being staunch with that list. It says in third grade you should learn da 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 da. No, sometimes we learn it in fourth grade, or maybe we learned it in second grade. That's not the be all and end all, but it's kind of a starting place for us to be. And then the idea is, okay, so my child started here at this level at the beginning. Did they progress by the end of the year? And that's really the key: progression, learning, improvement. All right. And then as you review the portfolio, there are going to be places and areas that stand out as in need of improvement. And so those are wonderful things that we can jot down and use as we plan for the new school year. And it's super, super helpful to do this. You can have a clear picture of your child's strengths and your weaknesses, and use that when you go to plan the next school year. Helpful, and your child will appreciate it. There's so many times that we just think, well, she's in fifth grade. Straight up fifth grade is what I'm going to get her. No, every child is unique and different, and I love having that flexibility as a parent to fit them perfectly what they need and how to help them meet all the amazing. All right, just a few couple things, and then we're going to close out for the day. Just a few testing tips. I know we talked about the different types of testing, formal and informal. Then we talked about portfolio. We mentioned standardized testing, and that's something that you may or may not want to get involved in. If your state requires it, you have no choice. Just buckle down. Find a testing company. And like I mentioned earlier, some of those offer them online, which makes it super easy to do in today's world with all the technology. So, there'll be some proctoring requirements. Sometimes they'll want you to have certain browsers on take it online right there in the comfort of your home. I don't know if your children are like mine, but they would always get test anxiety. We're homers. We're at a good bit or around friends. And so that whole idea of going in a strange place with strange people, taking a test that, they've never done before. It was all so anxiety producing for each one of my kids that they never tested well. And so it was never a good indicator of what they were learning. But now that the tables have turned and we're more at home, online, testing anxiety isn't as big of it as it was before for us. All right. So the biggest thing that I want to leave is in this whole area of assessment testing is to remember that as a home, you have that option to do what fits your child the best. And so even though you have to follow your state's guidelines, obviously do that first and foremost. After that, you are free to fit your child the best. From maybe they do really well taking quizzes and tests, because then it gives them feedback on their performance, and then they can use that for the next step. Others just don't, and so you can make that call. The other thing is the fact that as our kids get older, if they are choosing a career for their future that requires college education, it is important for us as parents to prepare them to take tests, because there's no way around it. If they have to go to college, for example, your child might become an entrepreneur, and that's amazing. They don't need a college degree for that. In fact, they could just take some business courses, whatever, and go to it. But if your child wants to be a nurse or a doctor, there's no way around college. And so as homeschool parents, it is our responsibility to train them in how to take tests. There are testing skills, and that's really important that we prepare them and help them to overcome testing anxiety if that is an issue. And then, of course, there are those tests like the SAT, ACT, CLT in high school that they will need in order to get into college. And we have several articles on homeschool.com that really help you with this. There's even like a 15-week free test prep course you can take. We've all heard that the SAT is now online. They have several test prep courses that you can do within their online platform there as well. So take that time and help prepare your students if college is the future to understand, overcome, does help them. And I'm just, that's extra. I'm just sharing that because that was a real thing, really helpful for my older children now as they've gone to college, done that test prep and kind of get over that anxiety. All right, well, that wraps up our episode on assessment, homeschooling assessment and types, portfolios. I appreciate you joining us today. I hope this episode helped you with your questions regarding homeschool assessment. Please take a minute to check out the show notes, and here's to homeschooling and loving it.